I've heard people say the argument about alcohol where they say there's some health benefits to it and there's nutritional value such as antioxidants. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so the health benefit of alcohol is if you put it on your hands, it kills germs. It really is that simple. Look, if I was being as generous as I possibly could be, I would say that there might be some small benefits to drinking a very small amount of alcohol, but that there are absolutely, definitely some quite large disadvantages of doing it. So antioxidants, if you're interested in antioxidants, I have some great news for you. They have this wonderful thing called blueberries. Just eat those. Pretty much any fruit or vegetables got more antioxidant in it. In fact, one of the things that they do with those studies is they look at very specific types of wine. So they look at what you might call less processed wine. Wine is ultimately always processed. It didn't grow like that, did it? It was grapes, which are quite good for you. And then they processed it and fermented it and made it quite bad for you. But if you take the stuff that isn't made on an industrial quantity, it has more of these things like resveratrol and antioxidants and stuff like that, which if you take those in isolation, they have some health benefits. However, most people don't drink that wine anyway. Most people drink the industrially produced wine where, even those last vestiges of the benefit that you would derive just from eating the grapes has been totally and utterly stripped out. It's the basic point. If you want the health benefits of something, eat it as close to the way it grew as possible. So grapes are way, way more healthier than grape juice, which is, of course, even healthier than alcohol, which isn't really healthy at all. So there's some studies that suggest that people live longer if they don't drink alcohol, if they do drink alcohol, but those have basically been systematically disproved. Or what they did was they took people that don't drink alcohol as one amorphous block, and they didn't do any kind of like for like comparison. So, if you have terminal cancer and that causes you to stop drinking, you go in the same box as me. And my life expectancy, I'm pretty confident, is higher than somebody with terminal cancer. So that was fudging of the statistics. And look, I could go for days about this. I'll give you one example, though. Right, everybody thinks alcohol helps you deal with stress. Yeah, now, if that was true, alcohol would reduce your cortisol levels, wouldn't it? I'm sure your listeners are smart enough to know that cortisol is the stress hormone. What does alcohol do? It increases your cortisol levels by 3% per unit. What? 2.5 glasses of wine, 2.5 pints of beer, talking about a 20% increase in cortisol levels. That's not good for you, is it? No. There are actually a whole load of health implications of raised levels that you can get down the line. Again, I could do this for days. So those 2 glasses of wine, those 2 pints of beer, that's enough to reduce the quality of your sleep by about 24%.
Wow.
That's the deep sleep. That's the bit where your body processes and repairs itself and absorbs information and all of that sort of stuff. And like I say, we're talking like a couple of drinks. We're not talking huge kind of couple of bottles levels. We are talking about a couple of drinks and it has an impact. And I think that's what a lot of people are wising up to nowadays. Generally tend to be younger people, but they're starting to see the huge body of research that's out there that suggests that even very low levels of drinking has an impact, which is why basically no responsible government on the planet will tell you that there is a safe level of drinking. They just say the lowest risk levels.
What class do you think alcohol would be as a drug if it wasn't so normalized in our culture?
If we invented it now, it would be illegal. That's just like incredibly simple. So actually, some people put alcohol through the food standards tests. So if you invented a new product that you wanted to put into food as an additive and you wanted to sell it in the EU, they put it through those tests. They found that the safe dose for alcohol would be 2 units. People are thinking 2 units a day. That's not so bad. I can do that. It's not 2 units a day. Oh, 2 units a week. That's a bit strong, but well, at least we can have a glass. It wasn't 2 units a week. It wasn't 2 units a month. It was 2 units a year.
Wow.
If you wanted to have alcohol as a food additive invented now, you would be able to put about a drop of it in whatever you were, that tiramisu that you were making for sale to the public. you'd be able to put a single drop of alcohol into that would be it. So yeah, the only reason why we allow alcohol to continue is because it's always been there. It's harder to get rid of stuff that has always been there. And the alcohol industry spends a ton of money lobbying. It lobbies governments, and it does very well out of it. Over €1 billion goes into subsidizing the growing of barley, which is largely used to make beer. I think it's over 1.5 billion go into the subsidy for growing wine every year, which is used for making wine. They do very well out of this lobbying that they do. It happens a lot in this country as well. People say, oh, alcohol is really expensive. Alcohol is not expensive. Alcohol is incredibly cheap. It is 87% cheaper in real terms than it was 30 years ago. Anything else gone down in the last 30 years? No, absolutely not. Everything has gone up in price, apart from alcohol. The government, I think the last 10 budgets, they have frozen alcohol duty for 8 out of the last 10 budgets. And if you don't believe me, just go into a pub and buy something alcohol-free. They will charge you the same amount of money for an alcohol-free pint as they will for a pint with alcohol in, because there is so little tax on alcohol.
Is that just to increase the amount of people consuming it and buying it? Is that why it's been decreasing?
The reason why it's been decreasing is because number one, it's taxed in a really odd way, that it's taxed per barrel rather than the price of it. VAT, you don't need to do anything with VAT. As the prices increase, the amount of VAT increases. However, as the prices increase, the price of a barrel goes up, but the amount of tax on it remains the same unless the government increase it, which they never do. So the tax is effectively always being eroded in real terms. So what you really should have is a percentage tax on the product, and then it would just always go up in line with inflation. And look, you can look at it from two different directions. You can look at in Scandinavia, where they made alcohol a bit cheaper and a bit more available and people drank more of it. Or you can look at it in Australia, where they made alcohol a little bit more expensive and a little bit less available, and people started drinking less of it. The availability and price massively dictate it. 30 years ago, it was actually quite difficult to buy alcohol. You couldn't buy it 24 hours a day. You couldn't have people deliver it to you on a moped, which, quite frankly, I've come across far too many people who have supported excessive alcohol use using those companies. And they have absolutely no problem with serving people who are intoxicated and obviously in a big hole with alcohol. And I know that for a fact, because these are the kind of people that I've worked in. I have been sat in somebody's flat when one of these people turned up and he was just like, oh, there's your booze, bye. And I don't hold it against him, because I don't know what his story was, but he wasn't born in this country and he'd come over here and he was trying to work hard and he's probably trying to feed his kids. Good for him. No problem with him. However, the company's the way set up, it's basically immoral that they will sell alcohol to anybody irrespective of their situation. And they're not giving this guy any tools or any support to say, do you know what? This is wrong. I should not be giving you alcohol in the state that you're in.
Yeah. What do you think the trend's looking like maybe for younger generations like mine? Is the amount of drinking decreasing, increasing, staying the same?
I do. The number one, I find it very funny that you're asking me what I think your generation's up to. But look, there is some fairly robust evidence that suggests that there are more people in our younger generations who are not drinking and will never drink. And that is very pleasing. And I'm pleased to see that. And those that do drink often have a very different attitude to it. From when I was a kid, I didn't really pay to go to university. If I had, I might have actually paid a bit more attention rather than drinking all of that beer. So, yeah, I think a lot is different. And I think so many more of the role models that people are growing up with now don't drink. Taylor Swift, for example, stops drinking when she's on tour. If you want to emulate Taylor Swift, and personally I don't, but I can see what my daughter does, that sends a very clear message. You look at any kind of sport, you will find all of the high performers in any kind of sport don't drink. Novak Djokovic, totally sober. Tom Brady, totally sober. Ronaldo, totally sober. Harry Kane, totally sober.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are helping younger people have a much better and more balanced attitude with alcohol. Some of them, they see their parents making an idiot of themselves. They don't want to be like that. And particularly, they don't want anyone filming them and sticking it on the socials. In fact, I do a little bit of work in schools helping young people get a better relationship with social media. And one of the things that comes up time and time again is if I'd behaved the way I behaved when I was young now, I would never have got a job. It would have been all over Instagram and I would have just, been declined for every single job offer ever. Yeah, personally, I think it's getting better. How about you?
Bit of both. I don't really drink, maybe once a year, but yeah, I'm not too much of a drinker, but I'm at uni right now. A lot of people still do go out. A lot of people definitely use drink to a great extent still. But then on the other side, there's a lot of people I know that don't drink as well. So I think it's definitely not going, but it's definitely decreased. If I look at my parents' generation, I also see they're drinking a bit more than mine. But I think, yeah, you're right. Most people are starting to realise some of the health impacts of it. But I still have got peer pressured multiple times by people and by friends. Oh, you're not drinking tonight. Why are you not drinking? But why do you think that's the case? What is the reason for peer pressure?
Okay. It is ultimately a complicated thing and many factors are at play. What I have noticed is that often the people that want you to drink are the ones that drink the most.
Yeah.
And on one level, they know that they aren't really enjoying it. They know it's causing them more problems than they're getting, but they feel a little bit trapped. And the thing about being a little bit trapped is it's always nice to have company when you're trapped. And I think sometimes when we see people who aren't drinking, when we are drinking, it makes us feel bad because it is this kind of unconscious criticism of our behavior.
Yeah.
A lot of people do feel like they're being shown up by people not drinking. So they do whatever they can to try and remove that. And yeah, look, I guess I'm very lucky. One of the things that has helped me stay sober is I'm very disagreeable.
Yeah.
So if you tell me that I should be drinking, I'm more likely not to than do it. You can say what you like. It doesn't really bother me. I'll just come back at you. And honestly, it's not really that hard to outsmart somebody who's been drinking. I generally tend to enjoy that little bit of repartee, shall we say. But no, it can be hard.